Hey guys, it's Katie. So I have been watching, well, I've always really loved true crime. I was talking to one of you guys on Instagram through DMs the other day, and we were both saying, like, what does that say about us that we like murder? I don't want anybody to take offense to this. It's not like I'm some serial killer who loves murder. I just find true crime on TV to be really interesting and fascinating, and it's like the inner detective in me wants to figure out what really happened. And so yes, I have been recently watching a show on Netflix, and if you guys have watched it too, then join me and you can chat about it with me, because I don't have a lot of people in my life that really love true crime as much as I do. So when I get a chance to talk about it, it's like, blah, like word vomit. I just like want to talk. So I figured what better way to talk than to you guys and get ready at the same time. Well, this isn't so much about the makeup as it is about the show. So anyways, I already washed my face. Real quick before we get started, I have been using this again. It's wet because I literally just used it. And if you guys aren't using your Clarisonic, you totally should. I've had one for years. Like I brought it over here so you guys could see. This is my Clarisonic that I've had for years. Like, I don't even know if you can really see that, but it is like the OG. Like when they first came out, they came out in white, and then very shortly after that, they came out in pink, like this color, and I've had it for that long. It is so old. So Clarisonic asked, I got it through Octoly, and they sent me a new one, and I was like, yes. So I've been using it a lot recently, and I feel like it's helping with some of my like dark circle or pigmentation on my cheeks a little bit, and it's making my skin feel super clean. So I did use that today, and I just moisturized with, what did I use? Oh, I used my like Bobbi Brown Vitamin Enriched Face Base. And now we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so if I don't tell you what I'm using, I will link it down below just in case I get distracted here with talking about the show. So if you haven't seen it already, it's called The Staircase, and it's on Netflix. It's about 12 episodes or so. But if you're in the middle of watching it, or if you were planning on watching it and haven't seen it yet, then maybe X out of this video, because I probably will give you some spoilers, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So just keep that in mind. And this is, I've been watching some other YouTubers that have been doing more like true crime episodes, and I find like I love watching their videos. And they've been saying this, and so I want to make sure that I say my piece. I am in no way doing this to, like, I don't want to be disrespectful to the people who have, or the person who passed away. And so if you get squirmy with talking about murder or anything like that, again, maybe don't watch this episode or watch this video. But anyways, just wanted to say that I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody who had passed away. Okay, now we can go ahead and get started. So the show Staircase, it is about a man. His name is Mike Peterson. You may have heard about this case before because it is the longest ongoing case in, for sure, North Carolina history. I don't know about the whole country, but it started in 2001 and ended in 2017. So that's a really long time, like really long. I can't even imagine going through that for that whole time. I mean, that's a huge chunk of your life. But it's about a man, Mike Peterson. He's a writer. He writes novels, or I should say wrote novels. Him and his wife were at their house one night, and the way he says it is he and his wife were watching a movie on the couch. Once the movie was over, they decided to take a glass of wine out to their pool, like deck area. They didn't go in the water. They were just kind of hanging out on the lawn chairs out there and chit-chatting. And she had gone inside. She said she was going to go inside, and he said, okay, I'll be right in 15 minutes. And I guess he was out there kind of contemplating some storylines for his next book. And so he came in a little bit after she did. And when he came into the house after she had already gone upstairs about 15-20 minutes earlier, he found her at the foot. Let me close these windows. I think it might be too noisy. Hopefully that's a little bit better. So when he came back inside, he found her at the foot of the stairs, blood everywhere, and obviously freaked out, called 911. If you watch the show, you can hear the 911 call. He does sound very frantic, very desperate for help, and he basically tells the 911 operator she fell down the stairs, she had an accident, please come quickly. And then he calls back again because I guess that they didn't come quick enough. And so he calls back again, kind of, it's 911, I need your help right now, blah, 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 blah. So the ambulance finally gets there, the police get there, and immediately the police are very, very suspicious. The son, Mike Peterson's son, showed up too, and he said immediately he noticed that when they would go into a room, the police would follow them into a room. So obviously the police were very suspicious of them, or of the father of the husband, right from the start, which is totally natural. I mean, my husband and I always joke, like anytime something happens, somebody's murdered, somebody falls down the stairs or anything like that, I'm always the skeptic that says it was the husband. Like, it's always the husband. And so the husband obviously is questioned that night. The police ask him to tell them what happened, how did he find her, what did he do, basically telling Mike Peterson to explain the situation, just like any police officer would when he arrives at a scene like that. Well, he tells them the story that I just told you. We were out by the pool. She said she was going to go inside. I stayed outside for a few more minutes, and that's how I found her when I came back inside. Well, I don't know if you've ever fallen down the stairs before, or you've known somebody who has fallen down the stairs, or if you've ever heard of an accident like that, but you wouldn't think that there would be that much blood. And when you watch the show, it shows you like the scenes from the accident, because this Netflix documentary was filmed from 2001 until the end of this case. And so you see, interviews with Mike Peterson, you see interviews with his family and his lawyer, you see him interact with his family. And so when this happens, you see, unfortunately, what his wife, her name was Kathleen, looks like when she fell down the stairs. So there's so much blood, and you just wouldn't, I've never fallen, I've fallen like down one stair, like you skip a stair on accident and you kind of trip, but nothing like this. Like, you just wouldn't expect somebody to fall down the stairs and have that much blood. Like, it was everywhere. And so I'm sure that's what got the police very concerned from the start. It was just, when you came across that scene, it looked like a murder. Like, it looked like this woman was beat, not that she had just fallen down the stairs. So they eventually arrest Mike Peterson for that murder. And then he is going to go on trial for this murder, because the police never really look at anybody else. They just go straight to the husband. And of course, anytime something goes to trial, it always gets really ugly. Everybody's skeletons are brought out of the closet, and every deep, dark secret that somebody has is no longer a deep, dark secret, because the police find out about it and then it's out there for everyone to judge you on. So one of the things with this case is that the prosecution, and this was all in North Carolina, so the state of North Carolina was, it was North Carolina versus Mike Peterson. Mike Peterson has this case is like so confusing. So Mike Peterson was married to Kathleen. I need like a chart here so you guys can see. So it was Mike Peterson and Kathleen was the one who passed away. However, before all of this ever happened, Mike Peterson was married to another woman. They had 2 children, and at the time they lived in Germany because he was in the military. So they had 2 children, Clayton and Todd, 2 boys. They were really good friends with another couple. I forget what the husband's name was, but it was a husband and a wife. And they had 2 children, Martha and I can't remember the other daughter's name. They had 2 girls. So it was Mike and his wife, and then this couple, they were really good friends. 2 daughters, 2 sons. Well, Mike and his first wife eventually divorced, and Mike ended up coming to the United States, back to the United States from Germany. His ex-wife stayed there with the boys for a little while, and then eventually the boys came to the U.S. with Mike. So at that time, and then even before that, the husband, the friend who was their like family friend, the husband, he died. He passed away in some sort of military accident. So it was just the wife raising those 2 girls. And so this family, these 2, helped out their friend a lot raising those 2 girls. I guess Mike Peterson would go over to their house and read bedtime stories to the girls, and he just helped out at the house a lot. So when these 2, and then there's just so much to tell in this, there's just so much to tell that I know I'm going to forget something, so please forgive me. But then the wife dies. So these 2 girls are essentially orphans, and in the will, they wrote that Mike Peterson would take care of those 2 girls. So now Mike Peterson has the 2 girls, his 2 boys, and then he meets Kathleen, and him and Kathleen get married, and Kathleen has her own daughter from a previous marriage. So this is definitely a very blended family. Mike Peterson and his wife Kathleen, they adopted those 2 girls. So now Mike and Kathleen are together in the U.S., and they have Todd and Clayton. They have Martha and the other girl, I can't remember what her name is, from the other family that they adopted. And then now they have Kathleen's daughter from a previous marriage. So there are 5 children total. And they all said that, he was a great father. The children very much backed up Mike Peterson when Kathleen died. They were like, no, Dad, we know you didn't have anything to do with this. We support you 100%. They showed up to court cases. They showed up to hearings, and they were very supportive of their father. Now, not long after Mike Peterson was accused of killing his wife and arrested for it and about to go through trial, is when Kathleen's daughter kind of flipped a switch. She kind of did a 180, and at first she was supportive and thought, no way did Mike do this. And then she totally said, yeah, based on some other things that came out, she thought that Mike had something to do with her mother's death. And along with this daughter, Kathleen's 2 sisters also definitely thought that Mike had something to do with her death. And so it was very much like a divided family, unfortunately. So they go to court, and some of the things they go to trial, and some of the things that come out against Mike Peterson don't put him in the best light whatsoever. So apparently he was bisexual, and not that being bisexual doesn't put you in the best light, but when you're married to somebody and it comes out that you're bisexual and that you've had extramarital affairs with other men, it doesn't put you in the best light to a jury, because essentially what the prosecution was saying was that gave motivation. They thought, the prosecution basically, their story was, they had a conversation, Mike came out that he was bisexual and he wanted to have these affairs outside of the marriage with men. She didn't like that, and so he beat her and she died. That was kind of like the story that they were going with. And that was kind of the point where Kathleen's daughter was like, yeah, I don't think so. I think he had something to do with her death. So I'm going to join this side of the court. That was one of the things that came out that the prosecution kind of had on Mike Peterson. However, although I don't think it paints you in the best light when he was actually emailing, like, not prostitution rings, but like escort services. He was emailing escort services, and they, of course, had those records. He was emailing to basically have some sort of rendezvous with these men. So that doesn't make you look good, but in my opinion, that doesn't make you a murderer. And like I said, I watch a lot of true crime, and to me, a motivation, like in a case, you need a murder weapon, a body, and a motivation. So in my opinion, that wasn't enough of a motivation. I would see if he had a huge life insurance out on Kathleen. That, to me, like, money is usually a huge motivation for murder. But apparently, and I looked for this, I didn't just go off of the Netflix documentary, I did some research on my own. And apparently the life insurance policy was only $75,000, and it went straight to the girls, the daughters. So to me, that just wasn't much like of a motivator. The only motivation that I could see was that they had a conversation about him being bisexual. She didn't like it, and so he killed her. However, when they found Kathleen's body, like I said, it was very, very bloody. It was very gruesome. It looked awful. But she had these lacerations on the back of her head. And so in the autopsy, they ruled it as a homicide because they didn't believe that you could get those types of lacerations from just falling down the stairs. It just seemed a little bit out of the ordinary to have those kinds of cuts on your head from falling down the stairs. And so they thought that somebody hit her with something. However, there was no skull fracture. So whoever hit her with something, they didn't hit her that hard. It's not like somebody beat her with something. And when you think somebody's like beating somebody up, they're usually doing something over the head and coming down. And one of the things that they found was that there is no cast off. Cast off is when, like, maybe there's blood on the end of this brush. If I go like this, there's going to be blood over here on this wall over here. That's cast off. And so you would think that if somebody's beating somebody with something, they're usually going to pull it over their head to beat somebody. And so there would be cast off on the ceiling of that blood. Well, when they were investigating it, there was no cast off on the ceiling or anywhere where it seemed like if somebody was beating somebody up with something, like with an object, that it would look like that. So anyways, not only was there not a lot of cast off in the surrounding area, but there wasn't any like real damage to her skull. So whoever beat her just hard enough to create those lacerations so that she would bleed out, but it wasn't, she didn't have a lot of damage to her head because of it. So I thought that was a little strange. Like, if you're going to kill somebody, you're really going to probably go in on them to make sure that that actually happens. So that was one thing that was a little bit odd. And the prosecution kind of came up with the fact that the murder weapon, well, first of all, they couldn't find a murder weapon. There was nowhere to be seen. So they didn't really know, based on the lacerations that were on her head, what the murder weapon was, but the prosecution came up with the fact that it must have been a blow poke. And if you don't know what a blow poke is, I'll put a picture of one like right up here so you can see. It's basically something like, you know how some people will have those kind of decorative little things on the side of their fireplace and they're used to make a fire. Like there might be like a little broom with a dustpan to kind of clean up some of the ashes. A blowpoke is usually one of those things that's in there. And the sisters, I think it was the sister, said that she gave everyone the same blowpoke. Well, when they went to go search the house, that blowpoke was nowhere to be seen. So that's where the prosecution kind of came up with the fact that the murder weapon must have been this blowpoke, because they're hollow, they're not too heavy, and as long as somebody's not bringing it up over their head, somebody could hit somebody in the head with it several times and probably cause a laceration like the one that Kathleen had on the back of her head. So they kind of came up with this theory that that was the murder weapon, and because it was nowhere to be seen, that must be what it is. He used it to murder her, and then he disposed of it. Well, this murder weapon was nowhere to be seen. Like they were searching the house for it. Even Michael Peterson and his lawyer and his family were kind of searching the house for it because they didn't know where it was. Mike Peterson said he hadn't seen it in years. He didn't know. And so they didn't have, in my opinion, solid evidence that it was a blowpoke, number one. And the motivation, in my opinion, wasn't that strong, but I don't know. And usually, I gotta tell you, usually I'm a total cynic. Like I said, I always am like, nope, the husband did it. Doesn't matter. I don't even need to hear the whole story. The husband did it. But in this case, I was very confused. Like I would go back and forth a lot. And I know that the way that the documentary is written, sometimes it's biased. It kind of wants you to think a certain way. And I find that it's the same thing with Making a Murderer. If you saw that, the documentary definitely wants you to sway a certain way versus another. And so I kept thinking maybe that's why I feel like this. But when I think about like those three things, motivation, body, and weapon, I wasn't like totally sold. So they couldn't find the blowpoke. And finally, like this has been going on for years. I guess the son and the daughter were downstairs in the garage, and they yell up to their dad that they had found the blowpoke, that it was literally like leaning up right against a wall in the garage in plain sight. And Mike Peterson everybody was pretty suspicious at that point because they were like, really? Like, how did we not see this kind of thing? And they don't touch it. They just take pictures of it, and it's covered in cobwebs. It has like these little bugs on there that, I mean, you've seen the bugs before. Like when something is left in the garage for a really long time, it's covered in cobwebs, and these other bugs kind of get caught up in the cobwebs, and so there's dead bugs on it. Like it clearly looked like it hadn't been touched in years. And so that was a little strange. Like if that was the weapon, although years had gone by, it didn't look like it had been handled in a really long time. But nonetheless, they send it off for, actually they have somebody come and take a look at it ahead of time and say, do you think that there is blood on here? Does it look like there's any sort of DNA on here? And there wasn't. There was no blood on it. Kathleen's blood wasn't on it. And so during the trial, the lawyer, Rudolph, I loved him, by the way. He's questioning this guy about like what the murder weapon was and trying to make him say, yes, we believe that the murder weapon was a blowpoke. And the prosecution knew that it was nowhere to be found too. So then David Rudolph kind of pulls it out. He's like, oh, this one? And obviously show pictures of it and all of that, basically saying like, no, that's not the murder weapon, or it wasn't with this one. So the prosecution says, well, that must not be the blowpoke. It must be a different blowpoke. Which, I don't know, it just kind of like makes you think, is this even the murder weapon, number one? Number two, if it is the murder weapon, it can't be that one because there's no blood DNA on it. Or number three, there's multiple blowpokes that these people have. And I feel like a blowpoke is such a random, it's such a random weapon to use, but I don't know. The main evidence against him was not only those two things, but get this is nuts. This was one thing that kind of made me like, oh, maybe. remember I told you he had, when he was living in Germany with his ex-wife, they had these two friends, and the husband died in war, and the wife was raising the two girls on her own, and he would come over to help. Well, they go back to Germany, and they question his ex-wife, and, trying to get some information out of her, like, could he have been having an affair? Could he, did he ever treat you poorly? Did you ever have any suspicion that he could have done this? And the ex-wife is totally supportive of him. She says, no, no way, blah, 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 blah. That wouldn't happen. These were our friends. And the reason why they go back to Germany to question her is because, remember I told you that that woman died, and that's why Mike Peterson and Kathleen had adopted those two girls. She died, and she was found at the bottom of a staircase. Like, I'm sorry, what? So once his lawyer, David Rudolph, I think his first name was David Rudolph, found that out, he was kind of like, you could just tell that he was like, oh, shoot, like, we are in trouble, because they're going to find out that this friend of theirs that they were very close with also was found dead at the bottom of a staircase. Well, originally in Germany, when the autopsy was done, I'm like not doing my makeup at all. I like cannot multitask. I can't talk and do this at the same time. Usually I'm a good multitasker, but not with makeup and murder. When the original autopsy was done on this woman, and I can't remember her name, I'll try to put it up here. It came back that she had like a brain hemorrhage, that she had some sort of brain hemorrhage or aneurysm or something like that in her brain, and it was just ruled like an accident. So basically she had that, and that's why she fell down the stairs, and that's why she passed away. Well, they go back to Germany and excavate her body from the ground, from the cemetery, because they want to make sure that that's really what it is. So they dig up her body, which is kind of gives me a yucky feeling inside, because it's just like, why does this woman have to be like brought up into this, and she's dug up from her grave when she's buried next to her husband? I don't know, that just kind of gives me the yuckies. But anyways, they dig up her body and they do another autopsy on using a different coroner. Is that who does the autopsies? And the coroner comes back and says that it was a homicide. So that is like huge red flags. How do these two women that are very close to him both die at the bottom of the staircase? It's just very, very suspicious. So in my opinion, there's two things here. Either the second autopsy is a bunch of hocus pocus, and it really was some sort of brain aneurysm or hemorrhage or something of that nature, and she passed away like that, and then Mike Peterson saw that and saw that it was an easy way to fake a death. Or maybe there really was something going on with Mike Peterson and this woman, and maybe she said she was going to tell, and he murdered her. Either way, it is very, very suspicious that two women in his life are found dead at the bottom of the staircase. I mean, I don't know. But then, I don't know. Why was his ex-wife safe? I don't know. The whole thing is just so confusing to me. I never know what to believe. But once I found out that that one was ruled a homicide, I was like, oh, I don't know. Things don't look good for this guy. So they had that. They had, the blood spatter. Okay, so in a case like this, there will be some sort of blood spatter analyst, some professional that comes in and either tries to recreate what happened, or what the prosecution believes will happen or believes happened that night, in order to make a similar pattern to the pattern of blood that was on the walls of the Peterson house that night when they found Kathleen. Well, it's not really supposed to be like, oh, we know this happened, so we're trying to recreate this scenario. We're trying to create it so that the blood is spattered in the same direction, in the same exact way. You're really just supposed to, produce what you think is happening, and then if the blood spatters the same way, then you probably have your murderer. and what happened that night. But if it doesn't, then you kind of have to go back to the drawing board and think, okay, something else must have happened. You're not supposed to just make a certain blood spatter fit the scenario of what you believe to have happened that night. Hopefully that makes sense. So they had this blood analyst guy named Deaver, and he was hired to, see if he could figure out what happened that night based on the blood patterns that was on the walls. Well, he kind of had this idea in his head that, Mike Peterson beat her, but not too hard. He's kind of doing like this motion to beat her. And so he tries to recreate something, and this is all filmed. So he gets his workers, his employees, to try some different things, and they get it to splatter with the same pattern that was on the walls. And Mike Peterson, that night when the 911, when Kathleen died, he had shorts on, and there was blood on the shorts in a specific way. And so they were trying to match that, and they did get it to match. However, in a totally separate case, years later, there was a man who was convicted of murder and sent to prison. And it later came out that Deaver, this blood analyst guy, falsified a lot of information, not only in that case, but in other cases. And so obviously he was in big trouble for either not including all of the evidence that he had, or kind of adjusting evidence to fit his scenario or belief of what happened. And so he was basically just a shady guy that wasn't doing the right thing. And so because of that, that was a huge piece of evidence that really sent Mike Peterson to prison. And spoiler alert, he goes to prison. So it was the bisexuality, it was the fact that the family friend was murdered apparently and found at the bottom of the stairs. It was the murder weapon. And lastly, it was that blood spatter kind of evidence that they had. And at that point, the jury convicted him and sent him to prison. So, the lawyer, Rudolph, was like devastated by this because they were very confident that he was going to get off, and he didn't. So he's still researching how, they try every year to appeal it, and it's not getting approved. Appeal, it's not getting approved. So he's sitting in prison for 8 years before they find out that Deaver, that blood analyst guy, had been fudging a lot of evidence. And so next time they have the opportunity, they file an appeal, and because of that, it gets approved because of the whole Deaver fudging a lot of that DNA blood information. So they finally get the approval to appeal it, and that means that they're going to have to go to court again. And with that, I know that Mike Peterson was really hoping that it would just get dismissed because of the falsified evidence, but it didn't. And so their options are, at first, to go to court and be tried all over again, or he can, after a while, they give him the opportunity to do what's called an Alford plea. And it's very rare that people get the opportunity to do this, but an Alford plea is basically saying that you're pleading guilty while still maintaining your innocence. So you don't have to get up there and say, I'm guilty of doing this, blah, 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 blah. You can literally just say, I'm taking an Alford plea, because that's something that was offered to him. And if he took the Alford plea, he would get charged with manslaughter. So that's still on his record. The state still sees him as guilty. But because it would be a manslaughter, what's the word I'm looking for? Because he would be convicted of manslaughter, they would just see it as time served, because the maximum sentence for manslaughter was less than 8 years, which was the amount that he had already served in prison. So he really did not want to say that he was guilty. Like, that was something that he just really, really, really did not want to do. He refused to do. He was going to go to trial again if they didn't offer him this Alford plea. But the lawyer was kind of pushing it like, we don't know if we can trust these guys because we've already tried once and there was so much like BS information that who knows if we can trust them to be legit and, you know, do this the right way this time. So he takes the Alford plea and basically that's it. His sister-in-law, Kathleen's sister, just went off on him because you know how the prosecution, they can say, you know, their last few words, they can say something, they can address the lawyer and the Mike Peterson. And so she went off on him in court, but he got to take his Alford plea, and then it was just seen as time served, and he got to walk right out of that trial or right out of that courtroom, and he was a free man. He was sued by Kathleen's daughter for like $25 million or something crazy like that. So I don't believe he was ever able to write books after that because any of that money would just go straight to her. I know he had to file bankruptcy because they showed like the amount of money that it takes to defend yourself in court, and it was insane. I mean, I don't know how anybody, if something like that happened to me, if I was accused of something like that, I could never afford to defend myself like he was able to defend himself with Rudolph. And even Rudolph, for a while, he went pro bono because Mike Peterson legit had no more money. But I don't know. It's such a crazy, crazy case. And one of the things that has come out since then, many years later, is apparently a neighbor who is also an attorney came up with this theory that an owl did it. And I can't even say that with a straight face because it's just like so insane. Like, what, an owl murdered Kathleen? Like, how awful is that? But apparently this guy says that there are, I think it's called barrel owls or barren owls. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a specific type of owl that lives where these guys live. And they can be pretty aggressive, and they have really sharp talons. And his theory is that that's why she had the lacerations on her head, because their theory is that because they found blood on the outside, like door, like a slider door from the pool to the home, the theory is that an owl like flew on her head and like kind of got stuck in her hair and was scratching her head, and she kind of tried to get inside quickly and slam the door. That's why there's blood on the door to get inside the house. And because it was stuck in her hair, it was using its talons and kind of scratching at her head. And they think that because this owl was scratching at her head, that she was trying to like run upstairs either to get away from it or to get herself cleaned up, and she lost her footing and fell and then just bled out everywhere. I don't know. That's kind of a stretch in my opinion, but who knows? I mean, I guess anything can happen. But I still don't know. Like, when I just said that all out loud, like I'm doing this video, and so I'm obviously telling you guys about the case, it does seem like he did it. Like, the friend being murdered and found at the bottom of the stairs, and then I don't know, the whole like bisexuality thing, like he says in there that I don't know, that part's kind of unclear because it kind of seems like to me at one point he said that she knew about it and that it was just something that they didn't really speak about a lot, and then another time I could have sworn he said she would have been okay with it. But I don't know, I have a hard time believing that. I don't know if I would be okay with Ricky having affairs with a man or a woman outside of the marriage. So I don't know. I don't really buy that. But I don't buy that the blow poke was a murder weapon. But then how did she get those cuts on her head? I don't know. It's just so crazy to me, this whole thing. I have no idea. I don't know what to think. Like, when I say it out loud, I'm like, yeah, he probably did it. But in my opinion, was there enough information to convict him and send him to prison? I don't know. Like I said, I always feel like I need those three things. I need a motivation, I need a murder weapon, and a body so that you can run like DNA tests and stuff like that. But the motivation I didn't really see, but this is actually a really good color for blondes. But I also don't think that those lacerations were just caused by her falling down the stairs. That I don't buy for 1 second. Like, unless the corner of those stairs were razor sharp, I just don't see falling down the stairs and getting cuts like that on your head. Like, it looked like, I'm gonna say this, it really did look like bird talon scratches on her head. And I say that lightly because I don't really buy that theory, but who knows? And I always think the husband did it. Always. But usually it comes out that there's, like, in a true crime case, it usually comes out that there's pretty good motivation to do something like that. Like, either there's a very large life insurance policy, or he's having some sort of an affair and, wants out. But although it wasn't an affair, he would just have like rendezvous. And I don't think, and actually, he emailed the guy for the escort service, but then they never ended up meeting up. Like, he never followed through with it. So part of him was probably a little bit just like nervous to get caught. He had a really good relationship with his kids. Like, his kids were like ride or die for him. And it wasn't like in a suspicious way, like they were afraid of their lives or anything. Like, they literally, like, they all grew up. I mean, this was like, what, almost 10 years of fighting. This was like 10 years of fighting for him. And they always showed up to all the court cases. I'm gonna use this Lawless Beauty liquid lipstick in Brad. Wouldn't that be funny if it was named Mike? I got my lips redone a few days ago, so they look a little bit bigger or swollen. That is why. Okay, so this is my supernatural makeup. Really, it was just an excuse so I could talk to you guys about murder and that case. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'm like 50-50 right now. I don't know. He probably did it, right? Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.